Welcome to See You on the Other Side, where the world of the mysterious collides with the world of entertainment. A discussion of art, music, movies, spirituality, the weird, and self-discovery. And now, your hosts, musicians and entertainers who have their own weakness for the weird, Mike and Wendy from the band Sunspot.
It's the most wonderful time of the year, don't you think so, Wendy?
It certainly is.
Yeah, no, I love Christmas. I really do. I like all the lights.
I love Christmas lights.
And
I love them to a strange point of obsession almost.
Yeah, because Christmas lights are fun and
they look pretty in the snow.
Well, it also the thing is I can handle the snow up until Christmas. Like after Christmas, I don't want it anymore.
Which is funny because we have no snow right now.
No, we don't. It had some flurries today in Minneapolis. And it's supposed to snow up here over the next couple of days, just in time for me to drive to Wisconsin. So I'm really looking forward to that.
Well, we did have a little flurries here as well, but I don't know. For 2 days before Christmas? Usually it seems like we have more snow on the ground, and right now there's really none. So it doesn't feel too Christmassy.
No, it doesn't feel Christmassy except for the lights and all the warmth in our hearts and the goodwill towards men, I feel.
Indeed, yes.
So today we're going to talk about some Christmas traditions. Wendy, do you guys have any particular family tradition or something like that you really enjoy or look forward to or remember fondly?
Yeah, I mean, I would say I remember being a kid, just the whole like Santa tradition of we wake up really early on Christmas morning and have to wait until a certain time until we were allowed to wake up our parents, and then
sure,
everybody goes running out into the family room and sees what Santa brought, and I don't know, that was always really fun. How about you?
That is, well, no, the Santa one, a Christmas morning is always the big one where you can't fall asleep because you're too excited about what's going to happen in the morning.
Right.
And I enjoyed that. Well, I always liked on Christmas Eve, we'd go to my aunt's house in Milwaukee, and everybody would just be hanging out in the basement. And the basement would have all Christmas lights and Christmas music playing, and the adults would be drinking. The men would be playing poker. We'd all be eating and talking and running around and stuff. And then at a certain point in the evening, like this would be sometime in the night, you'd hear like jingle bells upstairs. And that would mean that Santa came, and that he had dropped off presents for everybody. And
that's cool.
And so then
he would visit you while you were all still awake then.
Yeah, I mean, we would do the Christmas morning thing too, but like we would get gifts from our relatives on Christmas Eve, and then some of those gifts would be from Santa as well.
Okay, gotcha.
And so you would get and that was
double Santa.
Yeah, so Santa would visit. He would visit Austin Street in Milwaukee, which is delightful, on a special trip. And so that was always exciting. And then we'd just play with the toys with all of our cousins and run around until, I don't know, 11 o'clock, 11:30. And then some people would drift off to go to midnight mass, and we would drive back into Waukesha and stuff like that. And so I always remember that, and that was the most fun, was hearing those bells. Because that was like
cool.
That like Pavlov's dogs. I just, presents, toys. Oh my God.
But it's more the, like the feeling of excitement of like, oh, I'm going to get something. I don't know what it is. Just, I don't know, that part was always really fun, I thought.
Yes. No, and just the immediacy of it. You'd grab the toy and then you'd get to start playing right now. Like right now. And then,
yep,
pretty
cool.
We would have there'd be 30 people all opening. It just was a fun kind of thing. So that's a memory I enjoy. That Christmas tradition I wish we still had. So that was a fun thing to think about. But like I said, it's the most wonderful time of the year, and you know that song, right?
I certainly do.
Right, it's some of the words.
Most wonderful time. That's the one that I always think of when I'm shopping and people are elbowing me out of the way and
Yeah.
shoving things into their carts.
Right. Andy Williams came out 1963. It's the most wonderful time of the year, with the kids jingle belling and everyone telling you be of good cheer. It's the happiest season of all, with those holiday greetings and gay happy meetings when friends come to call. There'll be parties for hosting, marshmallows for toasting, and caroling out in the snow. There'll be scary ghost stories and tales of the glories of Christmases long, long ago. Which of these things here doesn't fit?
I guess I'll have to go with the ghost stories for 200, Alex.
Right. Like you're listening to the song and you don't even pick up on this. The mistletoeing and hearts will be glowing when loved ones are near. There'll be scary ghost stories. What are you talking about, Willis? Andy Williams? And that's the thing.
Yeah, I always wondered about that, actually. That line always caught me, and I thought, I mean, I sort of just assumed it was from, A Christmas Story.
A
Christmas Carol.
Right, Christmas stories just,
but I was
shoot
like,
your eye out.
It seemed a little bit weird dropped in there like that, though, when you're talking about, like, just using the adjective scary ghost stories, not like, I don't know, interesting ghost stories.
Well, that's because there is a tradition of people telling scary stories on Christmas Eve. That's a particularly English, a British tradition of telling ghost stories on Christmas Eve, and that's part of where Charles Dickens got that stuff for the Christmas Carol. And we'll talk about that in a little bit, but no, I wanted to use that line from "It's the Most Wonderful Time of Year" as kind of an introduction, because it's just so ridiculous. You're like, what? Where did that come from? Like, Halloween is a couple of months ago. And, one of the things we brought up in the Krampus episode. Now, Wendy, you weren't with us for the Krampus episode because you were enjoying a vacation in sunny California.
Right. I wasn't there, but I did listen to it.
Right.
Of course.
So while we were freezing, and that's when it was cold. Like, it's been warm the past couple days, but that's when it was cold. So that's why we were jealous. But I mean, we talked about some of the stuff that went on in the medieval kind of winter festival and Christmas tradition. And, they talk about the things of like the 12 days of Christmas, right? And the first day of Christmas. That's because they used to party for 12 days. So number one, that's way better than just getting like Christmas Eve and Christmas Day off. Like most people don't even get Christmas Eve off. Most people just get Christmas Day off and New Year's Day off. And that's pretty much it. And so, but like they had like 12 days of partying in the Middle Ages. So like while their lives may have been nasty, brutish, and short, they still at least got more of a Christmas vacation than we do as adults in the 21st century. It's like we have iPhones, but we still got to go to work. So you've heard the word Yuletide, right?
Sure.
Yeah. So, okay. Well, Yule is kind of the modern English representation of an old English word that I can't pronounce, like Jule.
Okay.
And that was their 12-day festival.
Oh, I thought it was a log.
Well, they burn the Yule log too, because they burn it during that 12-day festival.
I see. Okay.
And so the Germanic peoples, and the thing is that they, they did this before they had their midwinter festival, before there was Christianity. So they have this Yule festival, and it's pagan, big midwinter party, and the Christians they use that, just because. So Christians, what they would do is, well, if you want to convert people, you don't want to get rid of their party. And
yeah, right.
And it's already, we talk about this. The reason they have these parties and stuff like that is because it's nighttime. It is night for a long time. We just had the winter solstice, right? The longest night of the year.
That's right. That was yesterday.
And I woke up after the longest night of the year. I woke up at 6 o'clock in the morning, go work out, blah, blah, blah. It did not get light here until 7:45.
Oh, yeah, right.
So it was like, oh my God. It really did feel like the longest night, the night that never ends.
Longest night ever.
And so you don't want to get rid of people's parties and stuff like that. So and they don't even think that Jesus was born, the cosmic conflagration of stars that the three wise men followed wasn't even in December. It was September. Okay. So the idea, so they're moving Jesus' birthday to midwinter so they don't dump the party.
Right. And right, because you're trying to convert people over. Right. They're going to be like, wait, I can party with this religion. I can't party with that one.
And, and they talk about the when it's more dark than it is light, especially in Europe, and this is where we talk about Halloween and the Harvest Festival, is that the walls between the spirit world and our world, that's when they're the thinnest. So on Halloween, that's where you're wearing frightening masks to be disguised, so that you look like a monster to them too. You look like an evil spirit, a troll, a ghost, or other strange creatures. And
so you fit in.
That's exactly right. So then they're like, oh, we're not going to bother him because he looks like a ghost too. And so they even had something called the Yule goat in Scandinavia, and
I love that.
The Yule goat.
That's awesome.
And so here's how one 17th century man describes the Yule goat. The young man who manipulated the Yule goat had joined two poles in such way the upper end of one of them was provided with an oblong head looking like a goat. The jaws of this could open or close as he wished, and this made a terrible noise. And so
did the noise sound like this?
I think that was the Yule goat. But people would go around scaring other people in the streets from Christmas Eve until the 12th night. And so during the 12 days of Christmas, like acting like a demon, acting like it was Halloween, that was, they would do a lot of this stuff throughout the entire winter period.
Wow, that doesn't sound a lot like the kind of Christmas spirit that we're used to.
No, it doesn't. But that's the kind of thing we're talking about. We even have reports of people are trick-or-treating in the United States on Thanksgiving in New York City and in New Jersey.
Wow.
So they are, they called it a bit
late.
They called it mumming.
Season.
They called it mummery. Dressing up and saying trick-or-treat kind of thing is that it's, it's the same thing we were talking about with Krampus and the European wild man and all these kind of celebrations where people were celebrating the spirit world, demons, trolls, ghosts, the undead. That kind of thing during the winter season and the midwinter festival. When you have the thin walls between the spirit world and our world.
Spooky.
And so, it's not that weird that they have a tradition of telling ghost stories during the Christmas season.
Hence scary ghost stories.
Right, that's exactly right.
Yada, yada, yada.
Now,
so it's not a reference to the Dickens thing?
Well, no, not in particular. But the thing is, Charles Dickens, in A Christmas Carol, he molded our modern idea of Christmas more than anybody else. So you take, in the 17th century, there's a guy named Oliver Cromwell, and we can go into the
Oliver
Cromwell. We could go into the entire English Civil War at a different time. But just know that the Puritans get into power. We're already talking about the Yule, Christmas, the whole party having a basis in paganism, right? And so what they do is they ban Christmas.
Oh, man.
And Christmas, didn't really recover for a long... they took the ban off when Oliver Cromwell eventually... he died, and then his son was in power for a little bit, but they brought the king back 20 years later, or the king's son. They beheaded the king, but they brought the king's son back 20 years later. And the Restoration, and then, Christmas came back, but it didn't come back in a big way.
Yay! Oh.
Until Charles Dickens wrote A Christmas Carol in 1843. And, the Christmas Carol really... first of all, it's just when Queen Victoria just a couple years after she gets married to a German, and so another thing is that the German guy brings the Germanic traditions. He brings the Christmas tree tradition to England in the 1840s. That it wasn't there before. The whole tea time thing becomes a tradition, and then they start telling ghost stories again. And Charles Dickens actually had written A Christmas Carol as kind of a different. He was writing it in a part of a different story originally, so it wasn't going to be Ebenezer Scrooge. It was about a great. Oh. It was about a miserly grave digger who gets visited by goblins, kind of thing. Cool. And then eventually, he decides to bring it as a Christmas Carol instead.
Interesting.
And so,
I didn't know that.
So the way we celebrate it, I mean, he brought that kind of. That was his signature story at the time. I mean, that was like when he did his retirement live reading or whatever. That was the story he decided to read to people, was that. So it really was his most popular story. And the idea of the nuclear family spending Christmas together, and that really brought that Christmas tradition and stuff like that to England, which they brought to us. And, we kind of carry that on, that on right. today. And so, but in the 19th century, telling ghost stories on Christmas Eve was just, that was something that
was normal.
Yeah, that was just something they did.
Is it part of the tradition, like putting out cookies for Santa?
Yes, there was. And there was a whole bunch of great stories. If you ever read The Turn of the Screw by Henry James, it's about a group
I don't think I've read that.
It's a great novel. So, read it. It's fun. It's funny because you're like, all these Victorian novels and stuff like that are so, they're boring and stuff. No, you can go all the way back. You can read Jane Austen, for the people that don't read. You can read Jane Austen. You can read Charles Dickens. You can read Turn of the Screw. You can read Jane Eyre. All of those great.
Thomas Hardy.
Yeah, all of those great books. And, you're going to be, they don't feel dated. I mean,
they feel real soap opera-y.
Yeah, they just, they
lure you in and you want to keep reading, and it's interesting. You're right. You don't feel like you're reading an old, transcript or something where the language is so different that it's difficult to actually read quickly.
I remember I tried to read the Bible. I remember I was at some...
I remember doing that once too.
You'd be like, okay, and it probably was in a hotel. And it's like, you know what, I'm going to read the Bible. Because it's here, and it's in. A lot of people love this book, and they talk about it in church every week, and I better check it out.
It's pretty popular. It's a bestseller.
Right, it's a big one. It's like, it's the greatest story ever told. Okay, well then you try to read it, and you're like, oh my God. You get into the, you start getting to the begets, like right after Adam and Eve, and they kicked out, and the language is so dry and boring, and blah, blah. What I'm saying is, reading
it's easy to get caught up in the language and miss what's actually happening. Right. The narrative.
So you can read these Victorian novels, and you're not gonna, the language will not be some kind of barrier. You can go back a couple hundred years. You can read Mary Shelley's original Frankenstein, and it does not feel like a book written, in a completely different era. What I'm just trying to say is,
but it wasn't that long ago that those were written either.
But a couple hundred years.
Fair.
When you think about a couple hundred years, how different would their lives be? You gotta worry about cholera and smallpox, and you don't
have electricity or heat
and dying in childbirth, the kind of things that these guys. Just the language wasn't that different. It was pretty awesome. There's a writer named M.R. James. And he writes a whole bunch of stories. He's known as the best ghost story for Christmas writer outside of Charles Dickens. And so you can find all of his classic stories. The BBC went through and adapted a bunch of them. They had a whole ghost story for Christmas series. And you can find all of his stories online, and they're super fun. And it's all about the people getting together and telling scary stories on Christmas Eve.
So
go ahead.
To go a little bit off topic, but
yeah,
it's definitely related. I know that the Doctor Who always has a Christmas episode. Is that kind of, and it's not a ghost story, but oftentimes there can be frightening things in them.
Yeah, no, I would say
it's a British thing, so it just made me think that like, oh, that's sort of along the lines of getting the family together, watching something that's everybody's mutually terrified of.
And that is a kind of thing that they really do have a whole bunch of original programming on Christmas Day. Like they've had the Doctor Who one on for 7 or 8 years now, and there's the Office Christmas special. I mean, they tied up the entire British office in their Christmas special, which is a great one. And that's not something we do as much here. Like people they rewatch old movies here. Like how TBS will show A Christmas Story 24 hours a day, or
Christmas Vacation.
It's a Wonderful Life was always the one that my family would watch. They would. When I was a kid, sometimes they'd put the old movies in the theaters. Like I remember going to see Miracle on 34th Street.
That's cool.
Because in the theater, and my mother's like, well, she was excited because she hadn't seen the movie since she was a little girl. She's like, oh, let's go. I'm like, okay, and it was fun. It was great. So that kind of thing is fun. But they have the British do have original programming that's not necessarily that Christmassy. Like Doctor Who will have a Christmas.
Yeah.
Will have a Christmas theme, but they'll be Christmas monsters. People will be...
Right, like the snowman or whatever.
Yeah, the snowman was a great one. And I'm really looking forward to this one. They got Nick Frost from Shaun of the Dead and Spaced. He's going to be Santa Claus. And there's a lot of Christmas death on Doctor Who. And that's, can always enjoy that, as opposed to like like the Hallmark movies or something like. Yeah, nobody ever gets eaten by a monster in like a Hallmark special, or like a family show in the United States would not have an alien invasion for Christmas. So I do appreciate that. And I think that might be a kind of extension, like that original programming into things that are not necessarily considered Christmassy. Definitely would be an extension of that. But this tradition of telling, I would love to bring this tradition back and tell, ghost stories on Christmas Eve. In fact, I'm looking at right now. It's funny you mentioned Doctor Who, and I thought about this when I was researching the podcast. But there's a book called Christmas Spirits that's all about these English festive chillers. And it's edited by a guy named Peter Haining. And Peter Haining wrote a bunch of Doctor Who books that I had read when I was a kid. So it's funny you brought that up as I was pulling right up to that Christmas Spirits book. And Peter he wrote a book called The Key to Time, which was for like the Doctor Who 20th anniversary. And that was one of the only Doctor Who books that were like at the Waukesha Public Library. And my mom must have got it out of the library for me like 6 times. So I've read that book.
Oh, wow.
I've read that book like front to back, like 10 times in my life. Yeah. So Peter Haining, I feel had
you wore the pages out for the next person.
I did, and so I feel like he was formative. And so the fact that he also edited a whole a book about English Christmas ghost stories makes me like him even more. And if you go back and you talk about the tradition here, is that Shakespeare even called one of his plays The Winter's Tale. And it's because these ghost stories were known as winter stories.
Ah, okay.
And, a fantastical story. And H.P. Lovecraft references it, Poe references it, that The Winter's Tale, the old wives' fables, the stories about goblins and sprites, have to do with the kind of things we tell each other when it's dark outside and when the walls are thin between the spirit world and this world. And you think that stuff's kind of fun too, because today, how many people that have a light, like a winter light that they have to sit under?
Oh, like the seasonal
affectation disorder.
Yeah, right. Yeah, a lot of people use those.
Yeah, a lot because the wintertime can be
depressing.
Like it can be a really depressing time.
Yeah, it's dark so much, it's cold and unpleasant, and
these people getting together and telling stories and having parties and midwinter festivals are just a kind of way to combat that kind of effect.
Something special to look forward to that. you could say I'm kind of like Christmas, where you say there isn't much that I look forward to during the winter. I mean, I like snow and stuff like that, but I mean,
Right.
in the summertime, it's like, oh, there's Summerfest and there's this and that and the 4th of July. And in the winter, it's just like, and then there's Christmas.
And then after that, there's
And then
long
there's 3
nights
months.
of death.
So if you can say like, hey, we have, winter festival to,
Something to
we're
look
going to dance
forward
around
to.
a bonfire and right.
Well, when I
It
was
sounds fun.
when I was a kid, I used to like how it got dark early in winter. I used to think it was fun.
Okay, why'd you like that?
I don't know. I thought it was fun. It was exciting. It was, I liked it. I liked the dark. I mean, I got my night terrors like every other little kid, but there's parts of the dark I really liked. The atmosphere and stuff, and especially at the dark in winter when it's, you can be outside and it's so silent, because the snow eats
Right.
all the sound. And
Yeah.
I thought that was fun. But as I get older, I find that the weather and the sunlight and everything affects me. So
Yeah,
that,
and I think it also just loses its charm. You've been through so many, year after year, it's like a cumulative effect of like, okay, what can I, when you're young, you're discovering new and different things each year. And then after a certain point, you feel like you've discovered everything there is to discover. And then now
Right.
there's just cold.
there's no more of snow or cold that I feel like I need to learn. There's no more about shoveling snow for your car, like shoveling your car out of the snowbank that I feel like I want to learn again in my life.
Yeah, and we choose to live in a particularly unpleasant place for winters where it's really slippery outside. It's totally common to slip and fall, maybe even numerous times over the course of a season. So
Yep.
it's like you injure yourself, you freeze your fingers off, your car battery dies, you have to jump start it like 20 times.
And and so people have parties and and they tell ghost stories and now instead of telling ghost stories, which is a tradition that ghost stories is a tradition I'm gonna try to bring back at Christmas, I think, with my family.
Well, that's fun.
Yesterday I was looking for something fun to do on the solstice, right? Just looking around, figured in Minneapolis there's got to be some pagans doing something. Like even in Madison, at Old Brick Park, they got a big, I remember they used to burn stuff. They had a big like bonfire for the winter solstice.
Oh, cool.
At the park. So I used to see that, and that used to be fun. Crazy hippies, Madison. I love them.
But no, that's neat that they do that though.
Minneapolis,
Something
I couldn't
different.
really find much except for they had a dark beer event for the darkest day of the year.
Gosh,
So I was like, we're getting the darkest beers out for the darkest day. And I'm like, okay, well, I guess we can celebrate that way.
well, hey, maybe somebody listening would know of an event in the area that you can check out next year. So
Yep.
we can,
And
if you know of one, please let us know.
and
If you want to throw one.
And I think we might try to do a Madison Ghosts event next year for
Ooh, that sounds cool.
Yeah, find one of the haunted, find one of the haunted bars, the bars that
That's
have
an
ghost stories
awesome
in Madison,
idea.
and just everybody
Sign
hang
me
out
up.
and come up and have like 5 or 6 people tell some ghost stories and have a couple of beers and just do something silly for the holiday. So we'll see what happens.
No, that's cool.
But I recommend, to all of our listeners and friends and stuff like that, tell a ghost story to your family this Christmas Eve. If you guys are bored or looking at each other like, oh, there's nothing to do and there's only crap, it's the same crap we've seen every year on TV. Break out a ghost story. You can just find one of the M.R. James stories on your smartphone and read it aloud.
There you go.
Give the gift of spooky this Yuletide season.
And if you find any really good ones, please let us know because I would like to read a good ghost story.
Yes, we love ghost stories here at See You on the Other Side.
Yes, we do.
Well, should we introduce a song that kind of talks about ghosts?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. And before we do that, I just want to mention real quickly, as I always do, that show notes are available online at othersidepodcast.com/17. So we'll have links to some of the things that we talked about, and we'll have the lyrics and a link to the song if you just want to listen to it again.
Awesome.
So what is the song today, Mike?
Well, this song we actually wrote a couple of years ago as a Christmas song about when our soldiers came back from Iraq. And it dealt with what they'd be, what they'd be coming home to when they got back, and the celebration and the great stuff that they would have, but also the fact that they saw a little bit too many ghosts at Christmas past. This song is called Next Plane Home.
There's dust in my bunk and no snow upon the ground. It's 110 outside, I wake up at every sound. I'm sick of being afraid, and I'm tired of the bad dreams. I won't watch my son grow up on a computer screen. I've seen too many ghosts at Christmas past. I've seen too many ghosts at all. I know the fireplace was cold while I was being G.I. Joe, and I'm sorry you poured your Christmas wine alone. But I won't miss another one. This year I put down my gun. This Christmas I'm on the next plane home. There's a table waiting for me, and they're playing my favorite song. There's a girl that's waited for me, and she's waited for too long. Too many friends have gone, and I've read too many tags. Too many people I love have come back beneath the flag. I've seen too many ghosts at Christmas past. I've seen too many ghosts at all. I know the fireplace was cold while I was being G.I. Joe, and I'm sorry you poured your Christmas wine alone. But I won't miss another one. This year I'll put down my gun. This Christmas I'm on the next plane home. This Christmas I'm on the next plane home. On the next plane home.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. You can find us online at OthersidePodcast.com. Until next time, see you on the other side.